Hi, everyone, and welcome to Understanding Physical Contamination in Food. It's a benchmark discussion. If you could just scan this QR code so that way we can have an active conversation during our discussion. We are going to be asking the audience some questions. So while we're waiting for some of our attendees, please feel free to scan the QR code and we will be getting started in just a few moments. It is now 2:01 and let's get started. So thank you all for joining us today. We are going to be going over our benchmark, and this is Understanding Physical Contamination in Food. We are going to go into our panel. Today we have Kurt Westmoreland. He is our Chief Commercial Officer here at FlexXray. We also have Kai Luker. He is our Chief Product Officer here at FlexXray. My name is Danny Westmoreland. I will be your moderator today. And our goal is just to provide some food safety professionals with a deep understanding of the scope of foreign material challenges in the food and beverage industry. We also want to improve benchmarks around the management and solutions of foreign material contamination incidents. So now Kurt is going to go into our methodology and our results for our study.
Great. Thanks, Danny. So, we did this study, back from February 27th to March the 12th, with the intent of really trying to identify, from a market perspective, what was going on, in the marketplace in terms of foreign material contamination challenges and issues. So this wasn't meant to be a survey around customer satisfaction. It was truly a response survey where we're trying to find out what was going on in the marketplace. As you can see there, we had 200 plus respondents from food and beverage producers, which was great. When you do these studies, you never know what's going to come out of it. And you can see there from the map, where the majority of the folks came from. It's interesting when you look at that. The majority of the respondents tend to fall in the areas where we currently have facilities, which would make sense because it's not just not just the folks that we're trying to find out from the marketplace, but it's also some of our existing clients.
Awesome. So first we will start off with our first audience question, and that is, how often do you have physical contamination? So feel free to scan that QR code and answer. We're going to give you about 30 to 45 seconds to answer, so that way we can have a discussion about our audience today.
Yeah, people changing answers.
If you're having any issues with submitting your answers, feel free to post it in the chat and we will add that to our statistics as well. All right, so Kurt, Kai, what do we think about those results? We have about 50% of our audience saying that they're having weekly incidents.
Yeah, and it's really interesting when you look at the respondents here in the webinar today versus what we also saw in the survey that we did. As you can see there, we had a little bit of 54% of the respondents in the survey were showing that they had some type of foreign material challenge on a weekly basis, with 73% of the respondents having something at least quarterly. The other thing that I noticed in the information that was coming across there, the respondents were also, I think it was 44% actually that said that they had something on a monthly basis. And if you look right here on the survey that we did, that's right in line. So very consistent information. The one thing that I find interesting with this, when respondents and when the market talks about having weekly challenges or weekly situations, We know that a lot of that is taken care of internally, whether it be via bimetal detector or an inline X-ray, or just physical review. So, those are the kind of things that, when you look at it weekly, it sounds like a lot, and it is a challenge from a manufacturing standpoint. But we also know that the marketplace and our customers have processes and systems in place to help address those.
All right, and then we're also going to look at the frequency of physical contamination by industry. So, Kai, we have a very strong presence. What do you think causes the higher frequency for beef, poultry, and RTE?
The processing parameters, number one. Lots of grinders, pumps, extrusion, slicers, just a lot of metal on metal potential contact, and also an opportunity for bone to be included as it relates to a potential foreign material there as well. I know it's indigenous, but still concerned with sizing issues from a bone standpoint. But far and away, number one, high processing, lots of metal on metal.
And Kurt, what do you think the challenges are for packaged foods and foreign material contamination on a regular basis?
What a lot of our customers and our advisory council, what they're telling us is, a lot of that has to do with the numbers of ingredients that go into the packaged food. So it's not just a particular product. A lot of times when you're looking at packaged foods, there's the inclusion of multiple ingredients, and when you're looking at multiple ingredients being included, you're just increasing the potential for contamination from multiple sources.
Awesome. And then who ultimately is going to have the final say when it comes to foreign material contamination?
And you can see the information there, from the survey. Most of the folks that responded, noted that it was the food safety and quality group at the local level that has, most of the decision-making authority there. But as you can see, there's a lot of folks that noted that at the corporate food safety and quality level, as well as plant manager. The thing that I think is important, while it may not have been noted here as collaborative, we know that from working with our customer base that the majority of the time, food safety and quality will be having conversations with plant managers, and they will be having conversations with corporate food safety if corporate food safety is an entity, depending on the size of the company. So very seldom do we see these kind of decisions being made in a vacuum, especially if it's something that's going to be outsourced, to FlexXray as a third party.
So based on that, Kurt, what do you think your insights are to decision makers for FSQA?
I think one of the biggest things, and Kai, you can jump in here if you'd like, but one of the biggest things is you're really looking at what the process means in terms of making a decision. So what is going to be the final disposition of the product? At the end of the day, the goal is to keep product out of the landfill, and to keep product in the supply chain. And when you start looking at the kind of things that have to be considered for that, whether it's rework or downgrading product or sending it out to a third party like FlexXray, you have to look at all of those and what that ROI is. But at the end of the day, the more product you keep out of the landfill, the higher the ROI. And one of the things that a lot of times I think sometimes people don't think about is the impact that could potentially have on your sustainability goals, because obviously reductions in product waste is a big deal when you start thinking about that. And so when as sustainability goals increase and departments are looking at things differently, I think that's certainly a key consideration.
Yeah, I would just take that upstream one step, Kurt, as well. Just having sweated this issue in my previous life, is do I have the right amount of product on hold up front as well? Do I have good information, the quality and accuracy of the information? Do I know that I've bracketed the right piece of this product from a hold perspective? Because all those decisions that you talked about are definitely important as we move further and further into the investigation.
All right, now we're going to go into some of the common actions for foreign material. Kai, if you could present.
Yeah, absolutely. So Typically, when a plant has a foreign material issue, they've bracketed that product, as I mentioned just a second ago, and then we're starting to make an evaluation into what we're going to do with the product. And generally speaking, most folks want to make sure that they stay in control and possession of that product. So an internal reinspection or an internal rework is traditionally the lens that we're focused on whenever we look at how we're going to handle the next steps of this hold. Disposal is something that everybody wants to avoid. And I think more and more folks are starting to understand what a company like FlexXray can do from a third-party entity standpoint, how we inspect, the quality of our inspection equipment, the integrity of our data, and that we really can support the evaluation of that product and allow you to do the things that you do best, which is continue to produce food instead of having to get into a reinspection or rework event, which really isn't anybody's skill set. Nobody wants to be good at doing reinspection or rework in a plant.
Awesome. And now for our audience, we are going to have another question. So rework is most desirable. So what barriers do you have when it comes to reworking product? This is going to be an open-ended question. If you are having any issues with our Slido, please feel free to put them in the comments. Hi, most commonly, what barriers do you see when it comes to reworking product?
Time, availability. Production schedules are already at a premium. Trying to find a place to rework that product. And I'll split reinspection and rework for just a moment. Rework in my previous life tended to mean finding a way to reuse that product, in some sort of function, whether that was bleed it back into the production line at some rate, divert that into, another product entirely that it can go into from a downgrade perspective, something like that. Reinspection, I would look at isolating the inspection equipment and then re-inspecting it, with an existing inline metal detector or X-ray. But from a rework perspective, generally speaking, rework is how are we going to handle this? How are we going to make sure that we use the right amount? How are we going to make sure that we divert the right amount and put it into whatever, other opportunity downstream that there is in order to continue to salvage as much of this project as possible.
Looks like it's spot on with what our audience is seeing as well. If you could go to the next slide. What are some of the most common actions that your company takes when faced with product on hold due to FMC? Go ahead, Kai.
So absolutely, there we go with the biggest bubble again, rework product internally to sort and salvage. We all want to maintain, keep our hands figuratively around that product, maintain the integrity of that. Don't let it get out into supply chain, those types of things. And then, of course, the next biggest thing, use inline or in-house equipment to re-inspect product. I like some of the comments from the previous slide about, sometimes we're not always 100% sure that we have the right, skills or use of the equipment in order to do a proper re-inspection. Oftentimes that re-inspection is just the same inspection we already conducted, just doing it again to make folks feel better. And we're not gaining anything as it relates to improvements in the detection size and those parameters. And then that's where utilizing a third-party service, the other biggest bubble here, can come into play. Obviously, the other one, dispose of product in landfill. We want to try to avoid that if at all possible. It's so much more costly than just the cost of landfill itself. Everything that's got to be reproduced, remade as it relates to that. And then from a third-party standpoint, again, we can find things due to the slower speeds, due to the right equipment and technology that the inline equipment was just going to miss, just based on the way it's set up.
It was interesting, Kai, looking back at the previous slide, there was a lot of consistency there in the comments, and that it was the time that it takes, having the people to do it, the confidence in the inspection. And that's reflected in the next slide there, Danny, because that's what the survey told us. And the thing about it is, as Kai noted, the speed of the third party service and the strength of the equipment. It's at a different level. And it frees you guys up, as Kai noted earlier, to really produce product versus trying to worry about rework.
So if we could go into some more of the costs that happen with physical material contamination.
Yeah, so I'm going to tackle a question right quick from the comment section, if I might. There, Kurt, John mentions traceability as a potential issue from a rework standpoint. It's often one that we don't think about. You know, in my previous life, we could use a portion of that hold back into the generation of some other product. At that point in time, we were taking a potential issue, and you know, the answer to pollution is dilution, so to speak. But the risk there is that if that was going to cause a potential issue later, we just have created a massive traceability problem at that point in time.
Yeah. Yeah, and when you look at these things from the cost of what foreign material contamination means, you know, as we got information from the survey, you know, one of the things that, you know, obviously came out of that was the cost of the destroyed product or the downgraded product, whatever it may be. And that one's kind of a high level, just, you know, on the surface. Yeah, there's going to be a cost associated with it. I think one of the things that oftentimes is not considered is this part around the inventory constraints, because, you know, if a facility is holding product until they have time to put a line down or shut a line down, or they're holding product for a weekend to bring product in, or to bring employees in on the weekend to rerun the product, you know, you can cut into the inventory challenges with your product. And as we all know, you know, supply chain challenges is something that's been getting worse and worse, you know, over the last few years for a multitude of reasons. But, you know, one of the things that I think a lot of times just on the surface, you know, when we're in a plant, you know, when we're doing our job, we're doing our job in food safety, and we're just trying to get the product produced and get it out. I don't know that we're always thinking about what it means in terms of the relationship with our customers or our retailer that we're selling the product to. And ultimately, that's where there's potential, you know, damage to the business, because, you know, when we start shorting our customers or we start shorting retailers, then obviously they're going to start looking for another source of the product. So the longer a product sits on hold, the longer that potential bubbles up, or the more often that potential can bubble up. And then obviously we've talked quite a bit already about the cost of rework and the opportunity cost of rework. And I think, you know, Kai mentioned this, but one of the key things to consider is not just the cost of the product, and it's not just the cost of reworking it, but the time that you're taking on that machine to rework product is time that you've lost on that machine where you could be producing new product. And so you ultimately have a bit of a double whammy there when you're having to rework, because you're losing machine time to produce new product.
Yeah, absolutely. Kurt, brand reputation, the proliferation of social media these days, it's virtually instantaneous. If there is an issue out in the consuming public, you know, brand reputation is something that every retailer, every manufacturer, everybody's concerned with. Everybody has entire teams to manage this aspect these days. Contaminants entering the distribution, anything that can be done in order to mitigate, you know, the cost of withdrawing product, regardless of how far along that it's gotten into the supply chain, is to be avoided at all costs, obviously. Regulatory compliance, whether that's FDA or USDA, and of course the differing standards that we deal with in between the two entities. And then of course, customer compliance issues and other third-party audits compliance. Just want to avoid foreign material contamination issues altogether, which obviously leads into the potential for fines. You know, the thing that we often don't think about outside of just the fines themselves is also the cost of insurance premiums that all of us carry whenever we have to have these issues, and then deal with the mitigation strategies and the fallout from it as well.
Recently, some of our team went to IFT First, and they actually, during one of the talks, they had this stat, which we thought was fascinating. Kurt, could you expand upon this a little bit?
Yeah, when you think about what it means in terms of and it kind of ties back to some of the things that we've been talking about. But the cost of preventing food loss, what does it really mean? And the fact that $1 spent preventing food loss saves the company $14 in operating costs. It's pretty significant if you think about that. The ROI in these kind of programs is huge. And it's not just in foreign material, but there's multiple ways when you look at things from a food safety perspective. But when you look at that, the big box up there, where 59% of the respondents to our survey reported that in-house resources are used as the most common foreign material contamination remediation tool. That's a big deal, because when you start thinking about where we're at in really in North America right now in terms of the labor market and increasing hourly wages for employees, when you're taking 59%, when 59% of the respondents are saying that we're having to use these in-house resources to take care of it, we're taking those guys away from producing product that can be used in the marketplace. But when you look at the investment in this, I think it's key. And one thing that I'd like to bring to your attention, I don't know your insurance policies, I'm not going to pretend to, but one thing that Kai and I have heard through our years being in the business is that as part of food recall insurance or food safety insurance programs that you have, and we've had some insurers tell us this, there's a pool of money typically associated with the insurance policy. And it's something you're paying for as part of the policy, but this pool of money, or this part of this money, goes into a pool that they would like for and encourage you guys to utilize for preventative reasons. And a lot of times we found our customers don't know that that's out there. And there's some things that you can do in terms of doing preventative type work. And, i.e. when you're looking at, like utilizing a service like us, one of the things that you have to do is to send in product for us to validate or verify that we can find whatever contaminant you're needing us to find down to a certain size. And maybe you consider taking that pool of money that might be available and do some upfront work where you build portfolios with known SKUs that have known contaminant challenges, and go ahead and do that work up front. So you expedite the process of the verification validation if you were to need to use us. Maybe you take a look at certain suppliers that you've had challenges with over the years, and you monitor those on a periodic basis. So just keep that in mind. It might be something you want to talk about internally. Again, not pretending to know what your policies include or state, but we know that that's somewhat common in the marketplace.
Awesome. Now, since 59% of our respondents are saying that their in-house resources are used most, we're going to ask our audience, how many stars would you give your confidence for your in-house foreign material detection capability? And again, if you are unable, please put your answers in the comments. We will give you a little bit of time to respond. Right. A little bit of differentiation. Kai, since you are our Chief Product Officer, what do you think about this?
I can always pick out my beverage folks or dairy products folks on the high end of these detection capabilities. It's always nice when you've got filter mechanisms and rare earth magnets, and then you're using X-ray and metal detection on the back end, and you've done a really good job on the front end of making sure that everything's good. Unfortunately, for most of the folks in the rest of the industry, I do see kind of this, not quite sure. We feel good about it, 3 or 4 level approach. We have the equipment. It's just that oftentimes the the right resources or technical expertise isn't developed, or it's not a strength in-house. We might be relying on corporate engineering, or we may even be relying on the vendor themselves in order to handle and educate everybody on proper equipment setup and maintenance.
Absolutely. All right, let's get started on our technology and FMC. So Kurt, if you could, for the next slide, could you let us know what this is telling you?
Well, really what we're looking at here is very similar to what we just talked about is how confident are we, or how confident is the industry in terms of what they're doing with the programs. And as you can see, if you think back to the information we just got off the little Slido survey there, it's pretty consistent, because we had a lot of people scoring it a 3, and I would, for me, I would think 3 falls into that somewhat confident category there. And you can see there's a differentiation between larger customers and smaller customers. And nothing wrong with that, but oftentimes a lot of the larger companies have a larger investment, whether it be in X-ray, inline X-ray machines, metal detectors, or whatever it may be. The one thing that I do find interesting here is you've got smaller companies actually noted being very confident in what they're doing, more so than the larger companies. Not exactly sure what that data is telling us, other than the fact that I think it appears that there's some companies out there that are being very proactive in some of the things that they're doing and some of the processes that they're putting into place. And one of the things that we have seen as a company, especially here in 2024, as we've added quite a few new customers into our portfolio, a lot of those new customers are somewhat small companies. And what we're seeing is these small companies, they understand the value of food safety. They understand what a mistake or a problem can mean to their brand. And as they're trying to grow and get themselves where they need to be in the marketplace, they're investing in food safety at a level to make sure that they're going to protect their brand. And I think that's probably why you're seeing some of the smaller companies being very confident in what they're doing, because they're making a concerted effort to invest into food safety.
Awesome. Now, when it comes to third parties, what should we be looking for, Kai?
Absolutely. So I'll tackle the left-hand side here. When an actual issue occurs, what do we need from a third party, and what are our expectations? Obviously, we need to get the data needed to make a decision about that product. Are we going to have to throw this away because of how widespread the issue was? Schedule reproduction, order new packaging materials, ingredients, all of those types of things. So turnaround time is really of utmost importance, just making sure that we can execute this project as quickly as possible. And then depending upon what's being targeted in the event itself, what can we glean from contaminant retrieval? We may have found a portion of it at our own metal detector X-ray kickoff during production, and we need to find as much as we possibly can and weigh that against a known good part that's missing in order to make good decisions about what happens next with the brevity of this hold. And of course, additional decisions around forensic or identification work. FlexXray internally doesn't have those capabilities, but we can use that information from contaminant retrieval and get that directly to the appropriate third-party lab. So there's not as much back and forth handling of those things whenever that aspect is critical as well. Talked about the data a little bit, but the data integrity and maintaining the data and understanding and interpreting that, looking at that, the breadth of that hold, finding out where the pocket of that incident occurred, ensuring that we've got everything locked up. We've narrowed that down. We're going to throw away that portion, and we have good data so that we can potentially and hopefully release the rest into the marketplace and recover as much as possible.
Awesome.
And one of the things that Kai mentioned there, Danny, was making decisions on doing additional forensic work. Historically, what we've done with our customers, if we retrieve the contaminant, is we would turn around and send that contaminant directly back to the customer. and then they would work directly with a third party, laboratory to do that work. We've started working with our customers now. We have a partnership with one of our partner companies where we can actually send the contaminant on your behalf directly to the laboratory. So you kind of cut out that step of shipping it back to you, and then you turn around having to ship it to a laboratory. So if you guys, as customers and as the market have that need, make sure you let your sales rep or your account rep know when you're dealing with FlexXray, because we can certainly take care of that for you.
Awesome. And then when it comes to the difference between FlexXray and other third parties, Kai, could you go over in the next slide how it's a little bit different here at FlexXray?
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, it's the technology difference. Other folks from a third-party perspective in the marketplace are using what we would consider our legacy technology, which we are either 1 to 2 iterations of technology advancements beyond at that point in time. The image on the left says an inline equipment image, but this is technically what a piece of legacy technology imaging would look like at a third party, or a rebuilt composite image on an inline instrument. The type of technology that we're leveraging right now in our equipment is much more akin to the medical industry. The amount of grayscale that we can separate, the amount of pixelation and contrast that we can create. So it's the same exact image in the two there. In the bottom image, we've separated these pixels. We've got up to 65,000 levels of grayscale, and we're able to find individual pieces of plastic and components inside that same protein powder matrix that's in the other one. And then your data. You want to make sure that people are getting your information back to you, maintaining traceability, maintaining pallet integrity, handling your product with the same or better care than you would have done so in your own facility. So right now we're not integrated into everybody's system, and we're maintaining most of our information from an Excel report format. We're continuing to advance this into a web-based portal profile here over the course of the next 6 months. And customers will have a breadth of information, a wide range of historical data and current data. You'll be able to see exactly what's going on in real time as we inspect your product.
And Kyle, that's a great point about the data. And one thing I'd like to note about the portal is, our industry advisory council that we work with has been extremely supportive and extremely open in the type of things that the industry needs to see from a customer portal. And we've tried to incorporate the majority of that. It's not always going to be exactly everything everybody wants to see all the time, but I think it'll be important for you guys to know when you see it, and when we eventually make it available, it's not something that we as FlexXray essentially just kind of pulled out of the air and said, this is what we think the market needs. We've taken information from the advisory council and put together something specific that we've been told that the market needs.
Awesome. And the next slide, Kurt, if you could comment, this is also part of the FlexXray difference.
Yeah, and this ties back to what we were talking about around forensics a little bit earlier. Typically, if we well, first of all, let me take a step back. The way our process works, if you send work into us and we find a contaminant, we're going to move forward with what we call contaminant retrieval, unless you tell us not to. So we don't want it to be a situation where you send us product and we call you and there's this back and forth. Do you want us to retrieve the contaminant? Because it ends up having, leading to delays and everything else. So unless you tell us not to up front, we're going to retrieve the contaminant out of the product. When we do that, you can see these are just examples of pictures. We identify what it is, we identify where it came from, and we put it on a piece of heavy paper like this, and we will send that back to you. So now you've got it in inventory if you need it, because we know that you guys as the industry, and when our survey has told us that they like to have this kind of information back, they like to have the examples back. But this also goes back to what I was talking about with forensics. If you would like for us to take that step, or we send this out on your behalf, to our partner in the third-party lab world that may be able to do some additional forensics on this, we'll be happy to take care of that with you.
Yeah, again, that's just to drive the point home there, Kurt, it's a visual representation. If we were able to showcase what our technology is capable of pulling off, most of us would have to take our magnifying glasses out in order to look at this. Metal in the 0.5 to 1 millimeter range, typically speaking. Bone, stone, and glass around 2 millimeters, and then most rubber gaskets and other similar type products around the 3 to 4 millimeter range from a capability perspective.
Yeah.
And then in the next slide, Kai, can you go over the FlexXray technology that we have?
Absolutely. I'll save the CT technology for just a moment. I'll talk about our 2D technology first. So I mentioned that it's adjacent to the medical industry. We are literally using the same imaging device that's used in an angiogram for a heart cath lab. We use a flat panel detector, a 17-inch by 17-inch square detector versus the single diode array that's used in an inline instrument. And in order to process that much imaging data, we're having to slow down and run 3 to 5 feet per minute to create and rebuild that composite image. We do that continuously. We're not indexing any product from a belt perspective. And anytime that we see anything on the screen that potentially contains a foreign object, we're stopping and positively removing that from the cabinet, removing that from the conveyor belt, isolating that. From an X-ray perspective, we're also using higher power X-rays that's in an inline instrument, up to 800 watts with focal spots down to 0.4 millimeters with the cone beam. Much tighter band of X-rays than any inline instrument is producing. So CT technology, this is exciting. We're the first in North America to have a food-capable CT scanner. We'll be commercializing this endeavor over the course of the next year. The gain that we get in 3D imaging is essentially we've removed the positional issue from a 2D X-ray because we can position the product and foreign material into any array as it goes through there. We've picked up automated detection and rejection capabilities. We've picked up a little bit of speed as well. It's up to about 20 feet per minute. Still slow comparatively speaking to an inline instrument for the food industry, but a substantial pickup in speed for us and the advent of automated detection and rejection as well. So when I say the two-dimensional issue, think of a piece of wire in your product. In a two-dimensional X-ray setting, this is the most difficult way to detect that wire. If it's standing all the way up over the pixel, then you have the highest degree of capabilities, even in an inline instrument. Well, at some point in time in the rotation of the gantry, we've recreated that ideal position and improved the rejection capabilities really in the power of magnitude by about 10 to the third, 10 to the fourth power in improvement. Significant results.
Awesome. And next slide.
Kurt, I'll let you talk about our network a little bit there, but we're just trying to get as close to you as we can.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. It's one thing that we have realized, and this came out of the survey as well. And again, for those of you who, on the webinar here who may have participated in that survey, I'd like to say thank you for that because the data was great. But one of the things that we found is, if we're within 400 miles of food manufacturing facilities, they tend to utilize our services more often. And the reality behind that is, if you're within 400 miles, in most cases, you're going to be able to get a truck to the facility within a day. And so therefore you're saving shelf life on the product, and you're keeping product in the supply chain and everything that's associated with that. So if you look at where we're at today, our first facility was there in Arlington, Texas. And then from there, we expanded into Aurora, Illinois, right outside of Chicago. And then we expanded into Fort Mill, South Carolina. For those of you who don't know, that's essentially a suburb of Charlotte, North Carolina. And then we've got the Vineland, New Jersey facility up in the Northeast. What we're really excited about is we're going to be opening a facility in the Las Vegas area, hopefully first week of September. If all the inspections and all the stuff associated with that go accordingly, it'll be the first week of September. We will be having an open house. I'll go ahead and put that out there for you guys now. The following week, September the 10th, that Tuesday, in Vegas. So any of you who are on the webinar that are based on the West Coast or have facilities on the West Coast and maybe based somewhere else and would like to come to that, we'd love for you to do so. We'll be getting some more information out on that. And then most recently, we're in negotiations right now on a piece of property to put a facility in the Boise, Idaho area. So, what you'll see here with, once we have all of these locations up and going, we think we'll be in Boise by Q1 of 2025. We're going to be positioned so that we're within that 400-mile radius of the majority of the large food manufacturing areas in the country. We know we got one little spot there in the middle of the country. Right now, a lot of that can get to Texas and Chicagoland, and eventually you'll probably see us there as well. But it's something that we're excited about. We've got over 1,000 customers right now around the country, and you're dealing with 15 of the top 20 food manufacturers that are out there. And it's an area that it's growing, and there's obviously more attention being paid right now to foreign material challenges as a result of some of the needs to reduce food waste and around sustainability goals and those kind of things. So really excited about trying to grow the business and get to some of these other locations so we can better service you guys.
Thank you. So now we're going to open it up for our audience for a little Q&A session. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. We do have a couple of questions to get us started, but as we go, if you have any, please put them in. Our first question is, how do you see industry handling supplier process and foreign material contamination?
That's one that has been, we've talked about extensively, really with the advisory council, and there were some questions around that within the survey as well. And it's one of those things that's, how do you build this into a supplier monitoring program or a co-packer review program? And I don't think there's not a silver bullet answer for it. I think it really comes down to the company and how you take a look at it. One of the things that we do know is if you take a step back and you look at supplier programs, we know that typically there are specifications around microbiological concerns. There are specifications around chemistry or chemical concerns. In some cases, there are physical specifications for weights, counts, and measures, and those kind of things. There's not necessarily a specific specification for foreign material because it's hard. The specification will be no foreign material in your product. And so how do you determine that, and how do you take a look at it? One of the things that we've seen some of our customers start to do is if they have suppliers or co-packers, you kind of look at them the same way. But if you've got suppliers that you've had challenges with in the past, is you kind of put them on a rotational basis where you're going to take a look at a certain number of pallets on a monthly basis or a certain number of trucks on a monthly basis, just as a checks and balances program to make sure that they're not having challenges with foreign materials. That's the simplest and easiest way to do it, and it's something that we've seen gaining a bit of traction in the marketplace because it becomes consistent with those other specifications they've got around microchem and physical evaluations.
Thank you.
Yeah, Kurt, I'll talk about that from an upstream technology standpoint as well. While we're on that, you really talked about the supplier quality management, but with the advent of other technologies, especially imaging or hyperspectral, if you're dealing with suppliers that have an opportunity on a sorting belt or grading belt to see exposed open product, if that's not part of the comprehensive inspection that they're doing upstream, you're missing opportunities just to try to mitigate that foreign material. So, we typically want to think in the lens of metal detector, X-ray, but there's really a lot of other things that we can use and put, another quiver on our arrow, another arrow in our quiver, so to speak, to help reduce foreign material, which is the end goal.
Yep.
Thank you. One of the questions that just came in, is your equipment capable of detecting polyethylene? If so, how small and thin?
Absolutely.
Common question.
We'll let Kai answer that one.
So UHMW and HDPE are kind of the bane of our existence in the X-ray world as it relates to plastic. So the more I can help you eliminate and get rid of those types of things on pieces of equipment or in zones where they can cause potential risk, the better. UHMW, it's virtually impossible to see. There are some opportunities when product is fairly homogeneous and has a high enough fat level that detection is capable. Polyethylene plastics are only slightly better than that. And I really do mean marginally better than that. We need to get into the world where there are some chemical additives. If we're looking at the periodic table, we get into Delrin from that standpoint, or to PTFE, even some silicone or nylon style gaskets and O-rings, that type of stuff. And in the perfect world, we'd all be using Rulon anyway, which is the easiest thing to see from an X-ray perspective. But it's a little more expensive for everybody to be able to use that.
Awesome. And then are we able to share the example of the detection limit slide? Absolutely. We will be making the presentation video available in the next few days. And then another question we have is, how can I strengthen my plant and its systems in regard to FMC?
Yeah, I think I mentioned some of that stuff. Really, on the slide itself, remember to know your equipment. And unfortunately, you obviously don't have to just know your equipment. You need to know your upstream equipment and processes from your suppliers and everything as well. But just taking that good, deep view of everything that's a potential opportunity, whenever you're doing your food defense evaluations or HACCP evaluations, to understand exactly what could potentially cause risk. And then based on that risk, what are the right tools to use from a detection standpoint, wherever that might occur. We talked about hyperspectral imaging. We've obviously talked about metal detection and X-ray a little bit. There are other technologies like microwave that are out there as well. Any opportunity that we can in order to address potential mitigation first and foremost, and then detection later, it's the right thing to do. And sometimes it's a multi-pronged approach.
Yeah, and we've had people in the past ask us, should we include this type process, third party or even inline X-ray as part of a HACCP plan. I think it's hard to include it as part of a HACCP plan because obviously you got to have a critical control point for it, which means that you're basically you're saying you're going to find any and everything all the time. What we encourage customers to do is really look at it more from a risk management standpoint, and how do you utilize different technologies from a risk management standpoint, knowing that there are going to be challenges, knowing that there's that you're not going to be at 100% detection most of the time. And one of the things that we've seen occurring a bit in the marketplace is, as part of that, kind of the verification of the validation step of a plan versus inclusion of a critical control point, when you look at it from a risk standpoint, is, do you say, okay, we know that there's a particular type of product that we've had challenges with at certain times, and we know within that product we've had challenges with certain foreign materials, and so therefore do you bracket a small run of that so that you're not having to put an entire production day on hold, and as part of that bracket, maybe you submit a few pallets of that as part of the verification validation step that your inline metal detector and or X-ray is doing what it's supposed to be doing. You obviously don't want to have it widespread, but if you bracket it such that you've got it under control, it gives you an opportunity to really zero in on that from a risk management standpoint.
Awesome. If there are no other questions, feel free to let us know if you do have questions. If we go to the next slide, I just want to thank you all for joining us in today's webinar. Any unanswered questions or any questions you may have, we have our email addresses there, and we will direct them to the appropriate panelist to make sure that you're getting the most quality answer for yourself. So please feel free to visit our website anytime to contact us with any questions that may arise. And again, thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope to hear from you soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.